Hey adapters, I'm Doug Parsons. I'm a partner at Simpatico Studios where we live stream conversations about complex business and social challenges with professionals like yourself who are working on the same issues. Our shows are live streamed in front of a global audience of your professional peers on simpatico.tv. I'm building a new type of online community for professionals like yourself on the Climate Adaptation channel. If you're a regular listener of my America Adapts podcast, I think you'll find that we're taking our conversations about important problems, policies, and solutions to the next level here. And if you're interested in being a guest, we'd love to hear from you. And now join us for this latest episode. Hey adapters, today our guest is Laura Zapata, the co-founder of Clearloop Corporation. Laura has made a career in crisis communications and reputation management, having worked in Congress, political campaigns, and Uber. A graduate of Dartmouth College, Laura is helping companies invest in new solar projects to accelerate the greening of the grid in their own backyard. Clearloop Corporation turns everyday purchases into clean energy, and Laura will share the current status of the renewable energy industry in the United States. And she'll introduce her organization as a new way for companies to reduce their carbon footprints and expand access to clean energy. Hey, Laura, welcome to the show.
Hi, Doug. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I want to talk about energy, but first, let's just check in. What's COVID-19 mean for you? How is it affecting your work, and where are you at?
Yeah, it's been a very strange time, obviously, as it's been for everybody else. Thankfully, everybody here is healthy, and here in Tennessee, where we're based. So that's been really important just to make sure that everybody keeps safe and that we're following all the right guidelines. But for us as a startup, we're brand new. So it's meant just being really scrappy and continuing to sort of pivot and do this a lot more often. So we got really good at setting up really cute backgrounds for everybody to engage and continue the work, because it's really important work. As you know, we're hitting this crisis. We know that it's really important to rebuild our economy in a healthier and greener, more sustainable way. And so that's what keeps us going and moving every day. And we're starting to see more companies are interested in that story as well.
All right, so let's just dig right into, what is Clearloop?
Sure. So Clearloop is a startup, brand new, where we are trying to help companies that want to offset their carbon footprint by building more renewable energy projects in the United States. So what companies get to do is they offset their own internal carbon footprint, whether it's for a product or a service or whatever climate impact they're having as a company. And then they do that by building new solar facilities across the United States. And so they get to not only take the credit for the environmental attribute, the carbon reduction in the atmosphere, but they get to also lay claim to expanding renewable energy access in the United States, which is an extra plus.
Okay, so they might be located in one area, and how they generate energy might not be renewable, but they're investing in it. And I guess the long-term goal is that they're creating this bigger infrastructure of renewable energy.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit broader than that. So it's not just about their energy consumption. So any company that makes a thing, right? Say, I don't know, a product, a shoe, for example. If a company is making that shoe, it's creating carbon footprint as it goes along. So from the manufacturing, the sourcing of that material to the shipping and the handling of that entire thing. And so that carbon footprint is the thing that we can measure. And we can say, okay, you can continue to improve your efficiency. So companies are getting smarter about buying local, buying better products, but there's sort of an irreducible carbon footprint, whether that's for a product or things like services like airlines, right? Airlines have every economic incentive to reduce the number of gallons of jet fuel that they use to operate. But and so as they look for new ways to get more efficient or to have better fuel, here's a way to just have an investment in reducing their carbon footprint by doing it somewhere else. So it's an offset. So you're not doing it directly inside of your operations. You're going somewhere else to get that reduction. And that is what we're offering, is doing it from the electricity grid. Our electricity grid is incredibly dirty. We need more funding to help build infrastructure to shift out of fossil fuel energy generation. And so here's a way for private capital to invest into new infrastructure in the United States that will be clean and will be long lasting for, at least the next 30 years, where those projects can continue to produce clean energy.
Okay, so you have an interesting background, but how did you get involved with this in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah. So, funny story, how life sometimes brings very random people together to bring new ideas to life. But my background is really around corporate communications and political communications and sort of crisis reputational management. And so the last venture that I had done after going back and forth between politics and the private sector was really coming back home to Tennessee and working on a campaign for a U.S. Senate candidate at the time in 2018. Who, if you've watched the Taylor Swift documentary, it's the campaign that they talk about that she endorsed during that time. So,
Nice.
big Taylor Swift fan, so it was a huge deal for us. But at that time, so I met the former governor, who was the candidate at the time, and then another gentleman who was the campaign manager. We enjoyed working together. We were not successful in the campaign, but we decided, there's other ways that we can take this desire that we see from companies to invest into something really tangible in climate action, and really use all the sort of background knowledge that we know about companies and sort of what they're trying to accomplish, and make it really simple for them to invest in this one tangible sort of carbon offset from creating new solar capacity in the U.S.
So your target really are corporations, so it's not like residential or anything, right? It's businesses?
It's businesses. So the way that it works is we started seeing more and more companies say that they're carbon neutral. And I'm sure you've seen this, they're carbon neutral, and that they're making all kinds of claims, and they want to take a real tangible climate action. But sometimes it's really hard to figure out what they're investing in, and where is this money going, and how does it work? And so we wanted to make it really simple for the consumer at the end of the day, to be able to know that the company that has made some sort of investment that says that they are reclaiming their carbon footprint, that exactly where that money is going. That money is going to build new capacity of solar in the United States, which is, feels really tangible, and people, it feels more accessible than just sort of like the scariness of science and the scariness of climate change. So it's really for any type of company that wants to do something about their carbon footprint, and wants to invest into new infrastructure in the United States with clean energy.
I always just kind of picture when these companies, it seems like state entities, we're going to go carbon neutral by 2050, but like you're an individual business, can they reach out to you and you create a pathway for them to be carbon neutral in 3 years, in 6 months, in 10 years? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so the simple, like the sort of simplest way, and the way that we spent the majority of the year last year was just learning and really making sure that we were diving in and learning from the experts who've been doing this for a lot longer than us. So there's sort of a standardized way that companies measure their carbon footprint. And it's sort of governed by a mechanism called the greenhouse gas protocol. So all these companies, there's sort of a standard way to do it. So it's not just us saying like, this is your carbon footprint. There's a sort of standard measurement. And so from there, you can really figure out how do you want to make those carbon reductions happen. And so what we're saying, we can convert those carbon reductions into new watts of solar. So by building a new watt of solar, a new megawatt facility, you're reducing X amount of carbon over the lifetime of that facility. And so the company gets to take the carbon attribute, and then that clean energy is going back into the grid. So it's a fairly simple way of just measure your carbon footprint, decide what amount of it you want to reclaim, and then go ahead and build the solar project to take care of it. The company gets to sort of name the project and lay claim to the attributes and what it's doing for that community. And then the community gets to use the clean energy. It's just going back into the grid. And you wouldn't know, the difference, since, we don't know where the lights that are powering this or our conversation
Right.
today are coming from.
All right. So I imagine you have clients all over the place. Is it helpful, like when you have a state like California, when there's an actual renewable energy target? I mean, does that create a bigger demand for your product, or is you're kind of working at a different level?
Yeah, so we're working at a different level because what we found is as we started researching all of this stuff, we realized very quickly that one, the reason we wanted to go after the electricity system and the grid in the United States is because it's one of the top polluters. So it's about a third of the US's carbon footprint. And so we said, there is a great deal of need, but also the technology is already there for us to be able to attack that as sort of the lowest hanging fruit. And then as we started exploring a little bit more into it, we also realized that the way that these solar projects are financed today are fairly limited. And so you have, it's called, the financing mechanism is called power purchase agreement. So the solar projects that are happening today across the United States are mostly financed through that mechanism. And in fact, the governor, one of our co-founders is Governor Bredesen, was the co-founder of one of the largest independent power producers, Silicon Ranch, which that's how they finance those projects. But basically, it limits the financing to a certain group of companies. So companies that have sort of a high credit worthiness or the ability to sign on to a long-term power purchase deal. So that's why you hear Facebook and Google announcing these big power purchase programs. And then it also limits the places where they're happening. So there are places with either high prices for wholesale energy, so places where there's a lot of resource. So you see a lot of things happening in the Californias and in the Wind Belt, but you don't see it as much in other places where there's no regulatory or political push to change the grid mix. So to your question about California, it helps when it's already helped with quite a bit of incentives for other for the mechanism that exists today. But for Clearloop, what we're trying to do is, okay, when there's no political or regulatory push to change the grid mix in a particular place, how can we get to leverage the private investment, this private capital of these companies that want to do something about climate change and focus it in the areas of the country where the grid continues to be incredibly dirty and communities continue to have the health and the other, terrible effects of having dirty energy pumping back into our communities.
Could you just clear this up for me? This has always been a bit confusing. When you say the grid is dirty, do you just mean the different sources that are coming, or the actual grid? Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, well, 20% of the grid is coal. I guess I don't completely understand.
Yeah, it's all of this stuff. It's just it just feels so layered and heady. But the United States basically has, the EPA has a few different grid regions. So they're sub-regions. So they break up the country into 22 different sections. And so basically all the transmission lines and all the things that we see, it's broken up like that. It's not necessarily state by state. And so that the way that it works is that the sources of the electricity production is dirty, meaning it's fossil fuel or it's creating some other type of carbon emission into the atmosphere. So whether the U.S. was very largely dependent on coal, now it's not. Now it's very largely dependent on natural gas, and so it's still a fossil fuel. And by dirty, it means that it's creating carbon into the atmosphere, which is in other greenhouse gases, which is what we want to make sure that we're combating against. Because if we want to do something about climate change, we know that the number one source is greenhouse gases. So if we can avoid burning fossil fuels in the first place and replace all these systems that are creating them, and for us to generate electricity, then we're the better for it. We don't need to worry so much about carbon capture if we can just avoid the carbon from being emitted into the atmosphere in the first place. So what we mean by that is in places like California, where there's already great incentives, and some other they've been building and sort of rebuilding their infrastructure to include more renewables, whether it's solar or wind. The effect of turning on the lights in California is very different in terms of the environmental impact that it has here in Tennessee or in a place like West Virginia that's very coal heavy. And so that's the big thing that we're trying to go after, is that if you turn on the lights for an hour, in Vermont, you're probably using a source like hydropower to power that electricity. If you're doing the same thing in Kentucky, you're probably using coal to generate that electricity. And so that's where we want to come in and sort of retrofit and start changing the grid mix so that there's more solar, because solar has zero emissions. And so that's why it's clean energy.
All right, so I want to encourage people in the community room to ask questions, and I have a question here from Ken. And what is the smallest size business that Clearloop would be good for? So I guess, what scale there?
That's a very good question. We have talked to companies big and small, from Fortune 100 companies to very, very small companies that are just trying to figure out what is the carbon footprint of something. So there's some companies that are still sort of pre-launch phase, and they just want to launch their products with some sort of climate action, and they want to partner with Clearloop to do that. So it really, we're open to all sizes, and it's really just a way of trying to figure out you have an impact on the environment. There is a carbon footprint associated with the things that you do as a business, and so how can we ensure that you're giving back by building more solar in the U.S. And so it's fairly straightforward process, and it's not too expensive. It's about $12 to offset a metric ton of carbon, and that builds 30 watts. That's in the dirtiest grids, and that's obviously indicative pricing depending on the location of the place. But it's not. It's in comparison to a lot of the other solutions that are out there, which makes us excited to open this up to more companies.
Well, it might not be obvious to everyone, but I think the issue of environmental equity is something that you're concerned about. Could you kind of explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think more and more what we found in our work and sort of core to what we do is we want to make sure that there is a more equitable access to clean energy across the country. And so a lot of times when folks are investing in climate solutions, they're trying to look abroad outside of the United States because they believe that for some reason other communities may need the help more. And so we forget about some of the communities here at home that still sort of are getting left behind of this energy revolution that's happening. And so that's where we want to come in and just make sure to remind folks that there's a great deal of work to be done here. And there's entire communities in the middle part of this country that could use the investment, because it's not just an investment in infrastructure and in sort of the environmental attributes of that, it's also the health of that community. And also as when you build that sort of infrastructure in that community, it sometimes becomes the biggest taxpayer for a community. So it gives back a lot of the sort of tax dollars back to that community that are infused into some sort of city or county service. So that's why we want to just make sure that people are thinking about where are you having the impact and where are you spending your money, and think about the communities here at home.
All right, so I got a couple more questions here, and I think these two are related. And so are some of the 22 grids better opportunities for Clearloop than others? And what do you look for to assess fit readiness at the grid region level? And the next question was, how do you choose solar project sites? So I think those two are kind of related.
Okay, I will answer them if my lights turned off. So let me get back and make sure.
We'll cover, no, go ahead.
We have a very efficient system here.
No, you're all good. Do you want me to repeat the question, or are you?
No. So you asked about how we choose the projects, right? And how in some e-grids are being better than others.
Like
yes.
So a particular grid is one better than another.
Yeah. So the wonderful thing is that we learned a lot from the researchers that have been doing this for a long time. So there's some folks out of Carnegie Mellon and now Stanford, and as well as a nonprofit organization out of Berkeley or Oakland called What Time, that's associated with the Rocky Mountain Institute. And so they have figured out a way to talk about the grid in sort of like what we talked about, if you turn on the lights in California versus West Virginia, you can tell there's a different environmental impact to that. And so the way that it works is the EPA has a system that measures all the different power plants across the United States. And so they measure that continuously. And what these researchers have done is basically try to figure out what is the carbon footprint over a year of that generation of electricity. And they've done that on the average, just sort of like this is what happens, as well as the marginal emissions. And so the marginal emissions meaning that you can measure the carbon footprint and the effect that generating that power has on the environment. And you can do that on the margin, which is you can measure what turns off when you turn on a solar facility. And so we're able to match that carbon footprint 1-to-1, which is really great because we're able to say, it's a much better investment in a place like West Virginia, where the e-grid is a lot dirtier, than a place like New York State, where it's a lot cleaner. And so companies get sort of a bigger bang for their buck because they have to do a smaller, they can build a smaller facility to have just as big of a carbon impact.
All right, so another question here, and this is related to being a client. And so what really is the high level step-by-step process for becoming a client? Is it just like they see your product, or is it more about you kind of reaching out to folks?
Yeah, we've been hard at work reaching out to folks and trying to figure out, because at different companies, it's different levels of people that make these kinds of decisions. Some of them have, a very sophisticated team that has a sustainability sort of director, and that's very established. But then there's some companies that are just trying to figure it out. And so it's their brand person or their marketing person that is trying to figure out how to do something, or their employee engagement people. So there's a lot of employees that are putting pressure on companies to do more and do better. And so we've been reaching out to a lot of companies, but we've also gotten quite a bit of inbound because we have a very easy, accessible website, clearloop.us. And we've gotten quite a few inbound, especially from companies that are doing a lot of direct to consumer, and their consumers are, tend to be younger. And so they want to showcase to them that they're doing something with the dollars that they've invested in that particular product, and that brand is going to last for longer than just, whenever it's popular. So we've seen a whole lot more pickup because of that.
Well, just a couple more questions here. We're almost at the end of the episode, but I just imagine you're probably well positioned that, the government really has taken a step back in, I guess, promoting renewable energy and that. But if it comes back to that stage, if there's something like a cap and trade, and just even, I'm sure you track those things over the years, that would be good, right? Just the fact that you're just encouraging everyone to kind of get into this space. Is there that role for policy at that level?
Absolutely. I mean, my background is, back and forth in politics. So we would love to see the role of government really play a part here. And we see that there's also opportunities, from cap and trade to just being able to ease up on some of the regulations that can make it easier for utilities to do this and support something like this. And so absolutely, when there's policy that is at work, I think that, in the United States, sometimes it feels like there's a lot of entrepreneurs, and capitalism can work to some good, and then the government can also step in. So, but in the absence of that, we're really excited about the opportunity and the possibility for all these companies to play a really active role. We've seen them sort of at the forefront of climate change in the country, and we're proud to partner with them.
Okay, so I guess what's really kind of what next for you is always about looking for clients and such. But yeah, what do you see going on for you?
Yeah, so we're really hopeful that as COVID continues to sort of, we learn more about it, and the economy tries to reset afterward. We're seeing a lot more companies being more thoughtful about how they're going to restart in their businesses, or come back to a better economy, and sort of like that, building more resiliency into their operations, or having a more sustainable brand and more actionable way to do things. And so we're really hopeful, particularly in the travel industry, that a lot of those folks that may not have opportunities, or haven't found the right solution that fits their needs, that as people start traveling again, they will be demanding for better investments into real climate action. And so we're hopeful that that will be one of those answers for them.
And also, we're going to transition to this just chatting again, but just the idea of a future conversation with you. Maybe there's a particular project that, the client himself doesn't mind talking about the topic, but maybe digging down into that level of what you guys are doing, I think people would be really interested. It's like literally, this is, I think that would be. We want to
Yeah.
have, we want to continue this conversation with you.
Yeah, we'd love that, and we'd love to be able to eventually, get to the place where we can showcase some of these projects and what they look like, and what a difference it makes in the community, and also just, talk to some of these brands that they really run the gamut, and the reasons why they're doing this is sort of all over the place. We thought that we needed to figure out why, like what was the incentive behind this, but at the end of the day, all we really truly care about is that they're taking a real tangible climate action, and that there's going to be some clean energy at the end of the day that we can all benefit from. So we're excited about the future.
Well, and again, another show we could have you back on. We focus on policy in some of our shows, and so I would love to just have like a brainstorm. Just put on your former Congress kind of working hat and just okay at the federal level, state level, wish list. What really would be kind of policies that would promote this kind of work? And so I think that could be in its own episode. So
Yes, yes. I love that. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. It's exciting to just dig in there, and you don't have to be a policy or a climate expert to just get in there and try to do something about what this existential crisis that we're all facing, and make it really actionable and better, and a better future for all of us.
and that too is its own episode. Is like we didn't really even touch upon climate change as being this like that hovers above everything, right?
Yeah,
And that most businesses don't have to really think like that. And so that in itself brings its own kind of baggage to a conversation. So that's very fascinating. Well, listen, this has been a great episode, and this is going to be available for you, but I want you to hold on. We're going to just finish this up in the Just Chatting section, and then we'll be right back. But thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Doug.